Alrighty, so week 2 in CIT82. I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but it did, so cool. Didn't rhyme, it matched. Alrighty, so in the RL, I say, in the real world, when I'm recording this, it's actually the second day of the semester. And so at this point, I've gotten to grade some work from students, which is awesome. And I've seen already students working ahead, which is great. So I want to give you more content to work on as some of you approach getting all of week 2 done. And as a general rule, I like to provide at minimum 2 weeks ahead when schedules allow. Now, this semester, I'm recording new content for this course. I didn't actually do it for week 1. I did kind of update some of the content written wise and gave you some information about using ChatGPT, which we're going to do a little more on next week. But in this week, you actually get the full experience of a regular week, okay? So this week you'll have a video for, in this case I call it Monday, but there's a holiday on Monday. So anytime there's a campus holiday, I move due dates to the next regular campus or the regular semester, whatever that is. So like if it's on a Friday, but typically our due dates fall on Thursday night. Well, not typically, Thursday night and Monday night. So typically it's a Monday that gets moved. So it moves to Tuesday night to get those things done. But really, as you may have already gotten, I talked about the first time, is that it's really about when I wake up the following morning. Because I do grade every day, unless something happens, which thank gosh it has not. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to talk about, and I'm going to go over the course content because there was definitely, I just finished recording the Thursday night item. I did make a couple of mistakes, and there was a tendency for me to go and correct them, but they weren't that bad. And sometimes it's just humans. We make mistakes, and sometimes we learn through the process. What I wanted to say is that now that you all went through and looked at the courses that are listed for the Web Developer program, I want to say there are some students taking CIT93 and CIT82. And in that sense, I just want you to know it wasn't our intention for you to take these 2 courses at the same time, but I understand based on the schedule, that's just what happened. And here's why I say this, because for those of you taking 93, you've already set up repos and cloned them into your local system. For those of you in 82, we are still working out on GitHub, and the next week you will clone into your local system. Okay, so we will move from, so this will be the last week we continue to work on updating files, creating files and folders out on GitHub. And GitHub is the website. Git is the software we use to version control on our local system, and then we'll use VS Code. Now you're actually going to learn about several of these terms in one of the items this week if you don't already know. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of start out by saying that because there are a couple of you taking both. And in general, I don't recommend it, honestly. But also, I don't, every student is different. I think more than anything, if you feel like it flows for you and you're able to keep up with both classes, cool. The idea was take 82, 85, and then take 93. But that's what happened. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about before I move into this week's content is actually classes like this. There's so many terms you're getting introduced to. But, when you're working on GitHub, you're working on the cloud. When you work on Canvas, you're working out on the cloud. It's this nebulous thing. And the reason we call it a cloud is we used to call them just individual servers. And we knew those servers. And this is back in my day, right? But I could actually physically see the server I was placing my websites on. But now you don't see that anymore. They're in these big warehouses, and it's just this huge data center that in this case is referenced by something we call the cloud. So many times we're working out on the cloud, okay? But for us, starting after next week, we're going to work locally and push things to the cloud, okay? So it is good to understand the context of which we're working because it helps us organize these concepts, right? But in this class, you may hear the term cloud and hear the term local, and I just want you to know what those things mean. The other thing is there's just a lot of things to get used to. Canvas is probably something you're used to. It's out. It's a thing that was a software site. It's a platform really as well that we use to deliver content to students at Fresno City College, right? And that is a system. And then we have Zoom, another cloud based system. But Zoom is meant for my office hours. So if you go to Simple Syllabus, you will see a link for Zoom. So I've said this before, but I think it's worth repeating. I have both on campus and Zoom office hours. So if you ever want to come chat with me, my office hours are, of course, the best time. And you can either come into my office, which I'm in right now, I'm not at home. Sometimes you see me at home. Today I'm in my office. Or you could come into Zoom, whichever work. Okay. So then there's Zoom, there's Canvas, where we have the course. There's Zoom, where you can come see me, which I suspect you know of both of these systems already. And now I've added Discord to our mix, right? So I just want you to understand that Discord is really meant for student-to-student communication. And I know I've said that, but I just want you to know that because I've had a couple of students try to reach out to me directly on Zoom or on Discord, and I don't accept friend requests out there because I'm mandated by the campus to only interface with students on systems like individually, on systems that they approve. So I provide Discord as a way for us all to talk out in the open with each other. I mean, you guys have a class channel, so that's probably not the best example. But that channel is for only members in that class. But it's not intended, and that's really what I would want to say. It's not intended as a way for you and I to communicate directly. That would be where we'd go to Canvas or come into Zoom, right? Canvas is the best way to get in touch with me. Zoom is a great way to come see me. Okay, now that's just kind of the overview I wanted to cover. For this week, again, we're looking, at the course in sequence. So in this week, like I said before, you have your Monday night item. Now, in this case, you have a lecture, kind of like what you did with about CIT82 last week. So you'll have one this week that you'll do out on GitHub. There was a mistake in that video where I actually was setting up the file, the markdown file, and I showed it out on the public, and it was supposed to be private. So I want you to know that lectures are always in the private repos, and then hands-on and current topics, if you do need to create something out on GitHub, are always shared from the public, because these two items are discussion boards, and those discussion boards are for all of us to see. So then therefore, and you do create print screens for this one, and in this one there's not anything you have to create on GitHub. I just want you to understand. So this one is between you and I. These two last ones are the hands-on, and the current topics are between everyone in the class. Okay, so I hope you have fun with these. There's just such good topics we'll get introduced to here. And then on Thursday, we have a lecture again. In this case, it's the roadmap for 2024 from Bo from Free Code Camp, which, by the way, Free Code Camp, great website, great way to learn web development, actually. And so that's a lecture. I actually add now on top of that something called commits, and you've been doing commits as you save files, but now I actually have you doing specific commits and showing you how to do commit history, because we're going to have that next week. Now, the one that is probably the most different from spring 2023, a year ago when I was recording new content for this class, is this one, which is the GitHub pages. So we've been looking at GitHub, right? So when we look at GitHub and we look at it, let's say 82 here. I know it's kind of hard to see from because of the font on the address bar is so small, but when we're looking at it here, right, we're interfacing with GitHub through the browser. And what ultimately we want to do is actually create websites through first just learning some base HTML, CSS, then learning some Bootstrap, getting a template, building a project site. That's all the stuff that's going to come. But in order to do that, we have to create we have to create files that are rendered as web pages. And we do that traditionally through a host. But in this case, we're actually using GitHub to do all this for us. When I first started, again, when I was a kid, we had to actually create stuff, and we had FTP it up to a server, right? Now we can just use GitHub for all this stuff, which is awesome that GitHub provides this amazing infrastructure. But what I want you to know is you'll end up taking your public, okay, and then I'll walk you through a process where you go down to pages. And the reason I'm showing you this here is in the video where I talk about this on the Thursday night item for next week, I talk about that you could go ahead and go into this because I have already deployed. You come down here, you hit main, and then you hit save. And then when you do that, this then is a URL that you can now use to create HTML images, CSS files, to render as websites and not as, the GitHub web interface. So the reason I say this now is that when I did this, it was kind of not exactly what I had thought I was going to do, but I ended up, having fun with it, and we create a little more than I had thought we would. But I want to show you the alternative that you could do, or actually, no, I don't recommend you do, and here's why. Because each of you, and here's what I want to show you, like when you go to github.com and you go to your username, okay, under your username, right, when you go to repos, and this is how I've done it in the past, I had students create based on their username and their .github.io, and that created a URL that rendered a website. And the reason I'm going to stop doing that is that, students can take the work they do in the course that we have that is public, in the public repos, and they can choose to put it on their GitHub IOs. But many students, not many, a handful of students now over the last year were already using a GitHub.io for something else. And it made me think, you know what, rather than to use the one that we can all create on our own, which, by the way, you can use this one as a great way to do a portfolio site, which is something you're going to want to think about, or a project, right? A site that shows the work that you've been, the output of the work. And again, you're new at this, you're just starting to build that portfolio site. But again, I just want you to know I've moved away from doing this because I want students to more intentionally, or they've maybe already using it for something else. So we're going to use our public repos inside of our course organization to create a URL, and I'll just click on this to show you. We end up creating a pages subdirectory, and then I show you how to include that image, how to do the HTML. We just briefly go over that, but it's kind of a fun thing, but I do mess up a couple times. I'm just going to tell you that's what happens. Okay, so good stuff this week. Again, this is your last week of using the GitHub web interface. We'll move to having this stuff local, and you'll see that because now I need to actually go work on week 3 as well. So have a great one, and reach out if you need help. Now, on this reply, okay, what I'd like you to tell me is any questions about anything I've covered, fine, right? And if you don't have a question, right, then what I'd like to know is, are you and I probably can figure this out because I could go look at the work that you did last week, but how many of you are also taking CIT93? And if you have, right, tell the other students about how your experience of creating local dev environments where we create locally, we do the work and then push, how that is for you. And if you're not taking 93, then I'm curious, are you taking 85 on the second 9 weeks? Okay, so your options for reply with any questions for anything I've covered. Also tell me if you're taking 93, tell your fellow students, you know, how that experience of creating your dev environments. If you're not taking 93 and are you taking 85? You know, and if not, why not? Because it kind of makes sense. Enough from me. Have a great week. Talk to you later.